Greetings and many, many congratulations. And thanks to Anuradha Das Mathur, the visionary founder and dean of the Vedica Scholars Program, for inviting me to interact with you, to have a dialogue with you, and to speak to you straight from my heart. I want to commend this program because it enables and nurtures women onto a life of financial independence, economic empowerment, and also a break-free career. I think this is an important aspect because many women, they are qualified today. In fact, in the area of STEM, what I have heard is that 43% of STEM graduates are women, but only a mere 15%, maximum in some years, maybe even 20%, stay on or join these careers. So, break-free career, how do we keep faith with our calling, whatever it is, the vocation? That message and that capability this program is building, and for me that is a very important aspect. And then there is this my own mission, which is that you should all become epitomes of Nari Shakti. And this is beyond feminism. It is feminism, but it's beyond feminism. Because I think to become, and this is our culture is the only culture, our civilization is the only civilization which deifies women. We are all Devis. Remember that. That's why the concept of Nari Shakti is not only about equality of men and women and equal humanity of men and women, but it's also that women have a special power above everything. Also, this 10th anniversary of your Vedica Scholars Program for women is a special occasion. And as I look at you young, ambitious, go-getting women, can-do women, I very much wish you all the best. But also, I think this transformational education that you have got, I believe it's called alternative MBA of some kind, but it is more than the MBA because, as I said, it equips you beyond the technical and professional courses to build something special that will make you and enable you to succeed. And also to contribute to the movement for a gender equal world, shared prosperity, shared well-being. Because, gender equality and women's empowerment in every area is not only about the well-being of women or their economic empowerment, it is also about the well-being of men and society as a whole and a country as a whole. So I'm confident that Vedica will not only open the doors for you all to a professional career, but also build within you that very special, the capabilities, the concept that Amartya Sen, the Nobel Prize economist, advocated and really emphasized, the idea of capabilities, building capabilities in individuals and communities, because that is what is going to make a difference. Now, thanks to dear friend Aradhana for persuading me to come here today, but I didn't need much persuasion, and I'm very glad to be here. Now, I must confess, I'm rather taken up by the title of your program, Vedica, because it has a civilizational, Indian civilizational ring to it. And it is about, Vedica means the altar of education, learning. It means self-awareness, self-seeking. And most of all, it evokes to me the Vedic idea, aham brahmasmi, universal consciousness, but also I am Brahma. I am in union with Brahma. And that is the ultimate in self-realization. So I congratulate you for evoking that idea, both in the title and I'm sure in your courses too. Now, today I would like to talk about three aspects of the topic. You already know the topic that I'm to address, but let me talk about three aspects of that. I'll tell you what my journey, my story is. I will also talk about women in diplomacy. Why does it matter? And the third aspect I want to talk about is, in my 43 years of bilateral diplomacy, 28 years I have been a foreign service officer, representing India to the world and world to India. And after that, for 15 years, I have been with the United Nations. So what are the lessons I've learned about leadership, which I would like to share with you? So let me begin with what is diplomacy. I would have loved to ask you what you think about it, but perhaps in the Q&A, we will come to that. But it's the art and science of, and the means by which countries and even organizations, because many of you are, or most of you are going to be joining the corporate world, organizations engage and build relationships, engage in relationships, build relationships with other countries, other organizations, other stakeholders. And they do so, of course, in the traditional country-to-country context and international relations context. They do so to preserve peace, to build peace, to make peace, to advance economic, social, and cultural interests and relationships, and make it mutually beneficial so that each partner has a stake in the other. So that is the art and science and means of diplomacy. And then you also have the idea that you advance your own country's interests in the world and bring the world to your country for mutual and maximum benefit. You represent your country. You fly the flag of your country abroad. So it is one of the noblest and most fulfilling of professions. I must tell you, I started out with an ambition to be a doctor, and my father, then there is a book on the Delhi University, and I should have brought also for you today. but it's 100 years of Delhi University, and I have my article in that explaining how my father steered me away from a career as a doctor to a career as a diplomat. But that we will do for another time. But I have never regretted that turnaround or the U-turn that my life took and my career took. As has been mentioned, I was the youngest to join the Indian Foreign Service, perhaps ever. I was 21 and stood second in the All India Civil Services exam. But my mother being my mother, who was very demanding and a perfectionist, she said, but why have you stood second? So, and the person who stood first that year was a nuclear scientist who's 5 years elder to me. But anyway, then from then on, I went on to, join. I was proud enough to join. Then we women were just 5% of the foreign service cadre, and today we are 13% only. 50 years later, very far from the 33% which we consider, and internationally and UN Women considers to be critical mass for purposes of gender parity. And of course, not even very far from 50%. But as at the undersecretary levels today in the Ministry of External Affairs, we have something like 20%. So there is hope that we may accelerate the pace of gender parity. But at the current level of increase, we will not achieve gender parity in another 100 years. So we need to have some system of reservation, some kind of lateral entry, but also women must opt for it. And I'm very happy that Vedica is doing this matching between the demand and supply. Because unless that is done, this matchmaking is done, we will not be able to achieve gender parity in any sector. And you need those, what is called in the UN context, and it is there in the, in the CEDAW, which is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which has been signed by and ratified by 187, now perhaps 90 countries, 190 countries. So it provides for temporary special measures, which are, the quotas, in order that women overcome the handicap, the disadvantage that they are suffering. So anyway, so this is something that I just wanted to highlight in terms of the MEA, but it has become, and over the years, it is in fact, even compared to the Western foreign services, it is one of the most women-friendly foreign services, an equal opportunity employer. And I've, of course, had the privilege of being married to a foreign service officer. So the disruptions and my ability to manage family with the demands of the family with the demands of my career have been somewhat better than for many others who, who are not married to, who are not tandem couples, as they are called. So now the question is, how do we, of course, apart from this reservation, one of the things I'm sure you will have studied, one of the things that we very much talk about in UN Women and we propagate are how do you break occupational ceilings and glass ceilings? Isn't it? Occupational ceilings is to be in professions which are male dominated and which are somehow seen as not very suitable for women, or women are not suitable for them. So there is that element of diplomacy that has to be also looked at. Then there is this whole issue of recruitment. Is there gender equality or gender equal conditions? Because you cannot, in a matter like this, ensure, mechanically gender parity. But can we ensure, in terms of recruitment, I call the 4 R's and 1 P. Recruitment, retention, re-entry, role, and promotion. So these 5 things have to be, gender equal. And then that doesn't mean that you have to treat women the same way as men. You can't. Because if you have to provide childcare, you have to give, the leave, maternity leave. It means when you have to level the playing field. So this is something that I want to highlight. I also want to tell you and call upon you, young ladies, that, before you, many women, and in diplomacy too, many women like C.B. Muthamma faced discrimination and fought against it. They were the pioneers. So it is our duty to follow on their footsteps and also break new ground, become pioneers ourselves in whichever way we can. Dare. So that is something that I would encourage all of you young women to think of and do, and also, learn and profit from the preceding generation's struggles and how they succeeded, the breakthroughs they made. And, I'll just give you one example. When I joined the Foreign Service, by the time I joined the Foreign Service, at least they had removed the rule that if you marry, you will have to resign. By the time I joined, we had to take permission before we, before we got married. So, of course, permission in my case was not a problem because it is with a fellow Foreign Service officer. And then there was also the provision, after joining as well, that if the ministry thought that marriage was in any way interfering in the discharge of my duties, I could be removed from my post. So, these kind of unfair regulations and laws were there, and Muthamma fought it in 1979, and the court ruled in her favor and said that you cannot, do with gender charity, or you cannot be in an ad hoc way, rely on this kind of judicial action. You have to change the rules. So by 1979, rules were changed and we had a more level playing field. Now, my story. I was, I tried in my own way to be a pioneer in whatever I do. But also, just before that, I must emphasize that not every time can you choose where you want to be, what role you are given. But there were times when I had to fight for those roles. For example, Under Secretary Pakistan. When a vacancy arose, I, went and sought that role. And it was at a time when General Zia, one of the most misogynist rulers, Pakistan in any case has a misogynist culture, But on top of that, General Jia was the ultimate. So, but I must say, it was the time of Mrs. Gandhi as the Prime Minister, and she personally took interest in Pakistan affairs and often convened meetings to which I was very privileged to participate along with the, the three services chiefs and all the others. So it was one of the most empowering. When you are given a role, it empowers you like nothing else, because you then grow into someone with gravitas, right? Because the role itself is, of course, if you fail, then nothing demoralizes you. But so I really was very much, although I faced during my interaction with my Pakistani, interlocutors during my visits, I was kept out of state banquets. I went with I mean, these are stories perhaps we will share separately, but it didn't matter. I had to do what I had to do, and India made it a point to have a woman after me as well. So the other thing is Sri Lanka also. When I went to Sri Lanka, I faced some kind of, the media was in any case hostile to India at that time. But because I was a woman, they picked on me. They would have articles in the island newspaper. Oh, she looks, the way you do these things is to, with men, you don't compare them to film actors or actresses. But, oh, she's Parveen Babi, and my code name became Parveen Babi. So, things like that. So you have to have a thick skin as a woman to take these, attempts to devalue you in your stride. The other aspect that I also want to highlight is you have to guard against special treatment. So after we finished our training in Japan, our ambassador called my husband and me and said, okay, you will be head of chancery to me, and your husband, Hardeep, will be doing political, internal, and media and communications. So I said, why? I don't want to do administration. I also want something that involves active interaction with Japanese society, media. So give me that job. So my ambassador said, but it's nothing against you. I'm sure you'll do a very good job. But it's the Japanese media, it's dominated by men. All the editors are men. And I have heard from my French colleague that when he appointed a woman as press attaché, she failed. So I said, okay, give me a chance. Give me 3 months. No, 2 months. He said, no, I'll give you 3 months. And he was a very empowering ambassador. And he said, okay, I'll give you 3 months. And let's see if in that period you are able to prove yourself, you keep this. So he gave me a chance. And I proved myself, fortunately. I mean, they had never had that kind of entree into the Japanese media the way I managed. Because I think there was some novelty element. Japanese speaking woman wearing a sari and coming into and I would insist on meeting them. And we had these full page supplements on India. So, and they in fact took out a half-page supplement in Asahi Shimbun, the largest circulation newspaper at that time, on me. So, you have to also stand up for your rights and your role many times. Maybe you're denied. In this case, I was fortunate not to be denied. Then there is this other thing. We women must seek. And I have a tendency, I think I certainly had a tendency to seek roles which may be seen as less important, not mainstream, but something, it's an untrodden path and something new. So this was the case in the 1990s with economic diplomacy. And I became the Joint Secretary for Economic Division and Multilateral Economic Relations. Now the regional, the territorial divisions were the kings, you know, and they said, oh, this is something new, something very amorphous. Because it is bilateral economic relations, it is multilateral economic relations. We had just, the MEA itself had got into foreign economic relations very recently, thanks to the leadership of people at that time like Muchkund Dubey and Arundhati Ghosh. So, who was herself a very dynamic economic diplomat. So, I said, I'm not going to be fazed by this. And those 6 years that I was JSAD and MER were the most productive and seminal for the evolution of India's economic diplomacy. And also the Look East policy was evolved at that time. I was in charge of negotiating with ASEAN partnerships, with ASEM, with APEC, all those multilateral partnerships, also in influencing the GATT WTO negotiations that were happening. So, we evolved from a focus solely on political security aspects of diplomacy to also the substantive and also the operational aspects of economic diplomacy. But, initially you face derision, you face underestimation, but you must stand your ground and make those who think that this is not important realize that it is important, that it makes a difference. The other aspect that I would like to highlight, and by the way, this also included the Indian Ocean Rim initiative, the organization, I negotiated that, BIMSTEC, many of these plurilateral, inter-regional and regional organizations, economic cooperation organizations. I was very much, the pioneer in negotiating. So, and these have now come to fruition. There is the Act East policy happening, and the Indian Ocean Rim is now expanded into issues of maritime security. India is taking that up very strongly. Also, this Sagar initiative. So many things, you have to be able to sow the seeds and believe that someday what you do may seem not so important, but someday it will bear fruit. Then I come to women in global diplomacy. There are 5 projects, as I categorize them, Panchatatvas of global public goods that the United Nations and the UN system seeks to provide. It's peace and security, disarmament, counterterrorism is one. The other is sustainable development, economic and other aspects of development in every way. Then there is the environment and climate change. Then there is the humanitarian and disaster response aspect. And lastly, this is the technology for development aspect, including governance of technology. And today the issues of governance of Tech 4.0 have become really important. And if you know, the latest summit of the UN adopted some declarations and it's working on this whole issue of AI. how do you govern AI? And in Paris, there was a summit co-hosted by India. So all these issues are issues of global public goods. So the concept, just as there is the concept of national public goods. So my journey began, of course, I was dealing as Indian delegate. My journey with the United Nations began in 1981 as a delegate to the Human Rights Commission. And then I must have dealt with almost every UN organization. We counted there are about 65 of them. But in some way or the other, I had interaction with these, or I was dealing with these, or I was in them. So, but it was really when I joined the United Nations, this was in 2002, after my ambassadorship in Budapest. And by the way, the only ambassadorship I had in Budapest was because we didn't want to move out of India. We were together in India, my husband and I. So for 6 years, we stayed in India. And then we went on our first ambassadorship. And after that, I joined the UN, partly to be together. But also, I think once I got in, I became a believer and I stayed on. So my first stint was with UN Conference on Trade and Development, where I dealt with all aspects of commodities, goods and services, trade in goods, services, technology, environment, all aspects of trade and development, North-South cooperation, South-South cooperation. And then later I was also director in the office of the High Representative for least developed countries, landlocked countries, and small island developing states. Now, these are the most disadvantaged countries, the poorest, but also otherwise geographically disadvantaged countries, so who require even more differential and special treatment, even beyond what you give or what is required for developing countries. So, but I would like to focus more on my role in the last 7 years of my UN stint as the first Indian woman to be Assistant Secretary General in the UN, and also to be the founding Deputy Executive Director of the first global organization set up to promote gender equality and women's empowerment. And there again, I want to tell you about the Panchatattvas of that mission. The first is global norm setting and setting up and establishing international standards, high standards of accepted and committed by member states to promote gender equality and women's empowerment globally, regionally, nationally, and in the provinces and in locally, because at each level this has to be downloaded and implemented. So these norms, and I'm very proud to say that in those 7 years and thereafter too, I think attempts are made, but in those 7 years, the kind of push we made to establish the highest standards and what I call a global gender equality compact is something that we are very proud of. And the other aspect of United Nations in general, but UN Women in particular, and my role there was to have the convening power. For the first time in the history of the world, we convened, and it was very much my task and role to convene the first ever global summit on gender equality and women's empowerment, with 72 heads of state and government attending in 2015. And then there was the advocacy and movement building. How many of you have heard about the He for She campaign? Good. See, I'm so happy that even several years after the launching of that campaign, you still remember it, because these were the kind of advocacy and movement building campaigns that were launched by us, unstereotype with then also women's empowerment principles in the private sector. So many campaigns were launched. Step It Up for Gender Equality, Planet 50/50. Now, why is advocacy? And we work very closely with the women's movement, because you cannot just have governments bought into this agenda. You also need the civil society and the citizens at large to really engage with that agenda. And that is why changing mindsets, creating a new normal, requires advocacy and movement building. The other aspect is establishing and strengthening the UN as a whole. You know, we were just, UN Women was one of the smallest entities, not very big. We didn't have too much money because it's a politically contested. You know, so many countries didn't like us to be even existing because they are so conservative and so patriarchal. They didn't want us. But there were others who supported us. But what we needed was every part of the UN, every sector of the UN's mandate must mainstream gender equality and women's empowerment in their policies and programs, in their recruitment. And that we managed through what was called UN SWAP, System-Wide Action Plan for Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment. So that was the fifth. So why is gender equality and women's participation in diplomacy important? So I come to that other part. Why does women in diplomacy, why does the role of women in diplomacy matter? Because it's the right thing to do, but it's also the smart thing to do. And I'm one of those who believes and has acted in the belief that in the exceptionalism of women in diplomacy. I know there are many other women colleagues of mine. We were at another seminar and she turned around and said, no, I don't believe in our being exceptional. I believe. And I'll tell you why. And I'm drawing upon Kautilya, I'm drawing upon my own experience to tell you why. Firstly, also, I think Prime Minister Modi, in his in India's presidency of G20, consecrated the concept of, and in many ways endorsed and announced that India was part of so-called feminist foreign policy or Nari Shakti foreign policy, if you will, when he consecrated the concept of women-led development into the G20's constitution and mandate. And what does that mean? Women-led development, women-led companies, women-led diplomacy. What does it mean? It means full, effective, meaningful, and equal participation of women in decision-making in all sectors, including, of course, diplomacy, but all other sectors. So, the key message I drew was women bring immense benefits to diplomacy, but we, like in everything else, whether it's the economy, the impact of women's participation, voice participation and leadership in the economy, or politics or governance, every time we have to prove the proposition, the why of it. And that's something all of you will also encounter, and be prepared for it and keep making the case. So, what is the value added? What is the exceptional value that women bring? What is their USP? So here it is. So there has been a seismic shift in the participation of women in diplomacy from olden times. I was looking up before this CB Muthamma lecture that I gave, and by the way, it's on YouTube, so anyone of you interested, and I've also tweeted about it, interested, please do look it up, because it will give you a very interesting insight into the history of the women's participation in Indian diplomacy. But, one of the things that I found was that countries around the world, their participation, the women's participation has increased. So, as a feminist, as a Nari Shakti advocate, and a diplomat, I have believed this. And so, let me give you some reasons why I believe. One, women are indomitable fighters, and they will fight for a just cause, for dignity, for the rights of peoples, and also, fairness and equity. And they don't easily give up and become cynical. This is a very important part. You see, the kind of work I was doing, it was very easy to be cynical. क्या होता है ये multilaterally, क्या होता है? Or, even the economic diplomacy part. But you have to keep faith, and, that's how you go forward. And now I want to give you the example of how I got SDG 5. Do you all know what is SDG 5? Sustainable Development Goal 5. There are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and Sustainable Development Goal 5 is to achieve gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. So to get that included as a standalone goal in Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development was a very difficult task. And how I brought the developing countries and the Western countries, even the Western countries who are otherwise great advocates of gender equality, were hesitant to have a standalone, dedicated goal. They said, let's mainstream it in all the other goals. I said, no, we do both. So we finally got this goal with 9 targets, 14 indicators, and we also got gender equality to be mainstreamed across the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development. And I do believe, maybe I'm being egoistical on behalf of women, but I do believe that any man would have given up on it, but I didn't. Women are also, in pursuing national interest in foreign policy, women can draw a better balance between realism and idealism, between short-term and long-term. And they're firmly, they have their feet firmly on the ground, but they are also looking at the far horizon and making that far horizon. And I've already given you some examples, but it's also about, for example, there was this Sri Lanka resolution in the Human Rights Subcommission on Minorities. We had been instructed by headquarters, those were the really tumultuous period that was between India and Sri Lanka relations. There was this Tamil ethnic crisis, and India wanted some kind of international consciousness raising on that. So I worked very hard with some of the other promoters in the subcommission to get a resolution readied for passage on Sri Lanka and human rights situation of Tamils there. But then suddenly we got instructions from headquarters. Mr. G. Parthasarthi was there. For whatever reason, they may be negotiating with the Sri Lankans, and they said, "Acha, ab isko pursue nahi karna hai." So, but we had taken it far enough, and I believed that don't be misled by the Sri Lankans, because this will then come in useful to you. And it did come in useful to us when you want to make a humanitarian intervention, which we made later, by the way. So, although my ambassador's instructions were stop everything, I said, I can't stop it. It's an irreversible force now. And behind the scenes, I was doing guerrilla action, and we got for the first time, it was a historic resolution. Of course, later when I was posted in Sri Lanka, they, targeted me partly because I was the author of that. But that's another matter. You have to take that also. Also Kautilya credited women with double the astuteness and 6 times the courage of men. And I believe emotional intelligence also. So I think that is a very important asset in diplomacy. And also women bring diverse perspectives. This is true in the corporate world as well. And they are also more democratic in gathering perspectives, actors, less dogmatic. Climate negotiations I've seen, because we brought in so many actors, so climate negotiations are very much in their nature which require this. And then there is the power of argument. India as a developing country, particularly in international economic negotiations, is on a weak wicket, right? Has been. Now it is gaining more strength. So your power of argument has to make up for the lack of or the deficits in the argument of power. And I think women have learned over the years how to do that. Their negotiating capacity, they have learned how to play above their league. And this is what I also believe they bring to this. And also they have been more intuitive, they have more humility, they also have a sense of what to say things when, timing is everything. And also they are better at identifying core interests and red lines in negotiations. Sometimes I have noticed men are blinded because of their ego, because they know it all. They're blinded to these things. And I apologize to the men present here. I'm going to make the caveat to that. So, and what is the essence of diplomacy? To get the other side to have your way, right? So that is something I hope we women are better at. So of course, like all generalizations, it doesn't mean that men don't do all these things or men are not good at all these things, except the only thing, the difference is that women, and I'm afraid for some time to come that will be the case, women are used to being underestimated. And, I have a daughter who's, elder daughter who's been on Wall Street for many years. And she's still, and she's done so well, but she still complains sometimes that, there is an element of underestimation of her worth. So, because women have that little bit of a chip on their shoulders, they are more driven and they want to be perfect at what they do. And that is the difference. And that is the value added. That is the USP. The secret weapon that women have, particularly in diplomacy, that you get underestimated, you swoop down and surprise them with your ability to win. So these are some of my thoughts on women in diplomacy and why they matter. But lastly, very quickly, I don't know how I'm doing on time, probably not too well, but let me come to leadership and my thoughts, what I have learned. So, in the UN, I have been fortunate to be in leadership positions throughout, because I joined the UN at a D2 professional level and then went on to the higher level. So, and also in the foreign service too, I've had different leadership positions. So, what have I learned? The first thing is, be your own leader. In your own eyes, be a leader. Conquer self-doubt. Because initially, when you get a leadership position, you wonder, will I be up to it? You know, what makes me different from others? And this is particularly for women, because again, most of us go into places which men occupied. The whole workspace is men-dominated, masculine space, so-called masculine space. So we must have both strategic and vision and overview, but also be an expert, be authoritative on whatever area or subject you are dealing with and you are leading on. And also find your voice, your unique voice. What is it that you are so good at? Even within a particular area or field, you know, you may have some special talent that you must find. And then, of course, all of this begins at home. Start practicing it at home and in your academic context. Here, I'm sure you're being made to do that. And also extend to every place and career. So this will to power is something we women need to cultivate. Then have a template and follow it. You know, many times when you enter into a leadership role, you say, okay, what kind of a template? You know, I don't want to make a mistake. So, okay, have a template, but don't be afraid to innovate. That's what I also found. Many times I was told by my deputies, oh, but it was not done this way. I said, I don't care. You know, I think this will be much more effective. So I think that's the other aspect. Cultivate your own distinctive leadership style, imprimatur, culture, legacy, create a legacy, and also develop differentiators. You know, how are you different in terms, not for its own sake. You know, sometimes some leaders I've found, they just want to be, you know, act different. But that's not the thing. What difference are you bringing? What value are you bringing which differentiates you? Then in order to be a leader, sometimes you may have to follow those above you. You know, I've always, sometimes we complain about it. Oh, I have to still serve this one or work under that one. But, you know, you have to follow them. And not only them, but sometimes peers. And you have to also follow sometimes those who are working under you, juniors. Because I've found that you profit a lot. Your leadership gains from this kind of a 360 degrees, learning and humility to some extent, without, you know, appearing to be lost, right? So, and then also learn from stakeholders, internal and external. I think that's a very continuous learning, both inherent and subjective, is very important. And then you also, dare to dream. Nurse ambition. Don't be afraid of that. You know, we are often told, oh, you know, there are all these memes I've seen about, oh, if you are a woman and you're ambitious, you are seen as aggressive, but men, it's kosher. So no, be ambitious, dare to dream, dare to go into unconventional areas, and achieve the impossible for you and for the organization, for the country, for the world, for humanity. And it will even, and match it, not just envision, but match it with action. You must have an action plan to ground that dream, isn't it? So, and even fight to realize your dream. And then lastly, I would say, or maybe one more, positive agenda, not a negative agenda. Because it's not about bringing something down or whatever has been created in an organization or a certain way of conducting diplomacy in our case. It's not about bringing that down. It's about what can I build anew? What can I create? So that positive agenda. And then also communicate that internally and externally, because the positivity gain for the whole organization will come from that. And lastly, you mentioned my novel, be a storyteller as a leader, because you must tell stories of success and of failure, because nothing hits the mind, spirit, and the consciousness of your colleagues, including your leaders, than stories. So that is what these are the 6 elements that I wanted to highlight from my experience. And lastly, women need to chart their own journeys of professional and personal growth and not be hemmed in by norms and expectations that the world sets for them. I'm not saying don't live up to your parents' expectations, but if they are high. But if their expectations are low, rise above it. And also, my novel, and I hope we'll have a little bit of time to talk about my novel, the protagonist, Malti's journey. She begins from a very small village in Ratnagiri, this novel is inspired by my very extraordinary parents, ahead of their times, feminists. So from there, her journey to being one of the first women graduates from Maharashtra, and she was almost the first women lawyer from Maharashtra. And then, all of that and their participation in the freedom movement, all of that is done, traced. But the important, I want to end from that novel. I have used a lot of Marathi poetry, English poetry, and other poetry. And I want to use from that novel what I call an anthem, especially for young women, but also for young men, and for all Indians. So it is a poem by one of the great poets of Marathi. Are there any Maharashtrians in this? It's such a wonderful surprise. I know that you come from all parts of India, but it's a wonderful surprise to see so many Maharashtrians. So N.V. Tilak, his poem, Bola Havete Malaka Ityatse Pure Zanato Meetsa Masi Bada. So my father used to recite a poem to us every evening, and this was one of them as well, and a very empowering one. Mishwarancha Jagatkaranacha Pure he tuchi पूर्णता मंगळ बोला हवे ते मला काय त्याचे पुरे जाणतो मीच माझे बळ माझे बळ माझे बळ. So it means, am I not complete and auspicious. The purpose of God's creation felicitous. It matters not to me what is your opinion. I well know my own strength, my own dominion.
In the run-up to this session, and Upasana and I were talking about everything that you've done. I told her, listen, we need about 2 days. And that's what it looks like. But because you've said many of the things that I had put down as questions, especially for lessons and themes for young women. So I'm going to use just 10 minutes for a few things that I feel I would still like to explore. And we'll take a few questions because we have a hard stop at 11:45. The first thing that you said, and it's also very important to me personally, and I'm sure it matters to young women, you said develop a thick skin. How does one develop a thick skin? I'm 55 and I'm still struggling.
We are all struggling. I'm still struggling. But we have to keep trying. Never give up. It is, you will continue to be judged, not as an officer, as a diplomat, as a corporate leader, as whatever you are doing. You will be judged always in conjunction with your gender. Unfortunately, that's the truth. And that's a reality. But I think you have to make them understand that gender doesn't matter. And in fact, it matters positively, as I've explained. And I really think, and the thick skin is true for even men, I would say, in any profession. I think we have to learn to, I always talk about Bhagavad Gita and detached attachment, sthita pragya. You have to learn to be a sthita pragya. I think that's the way. And I have had many crises in my professional career, different types of crises. And I'm a strong, that's why I said Vedica, I love the title, because I'm a strong believer in spiritual counseling, self-counseling, There was a time when I went through a very difficult period, and then one of my mentors said, why don't you do, a few stotras they recommended. And I really found a lot of strength from that. So I really think one should also develop emotional intelligence. That is what it requires actually, and resilience through some kind of spiritual seeking as well. And I would recommend to all young women, whatever religion you follow, have that side of you also well developed.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more actually. That's a
faith, I think, is very, very important.
Yeah. I wanted to go to your diplomatic career, and we are constantly told, and you said some of these things, that women can be longer term, they are more emotionally astute, they read the room. I was at a session with Madeleine Albright because of my other avatar.
I see.
And I remember this was in Georgetown in one of the discussions. And it was a spar between, there was enough men there and women. And when they talked about that, they said, people who are looking to build a relationship in negotiation skills, etc., very useful in certain cases. Would you ever send a woman to negotiate with hijackers?
Okay.
So I'd love to get your response to that.
Why not is my answer. It depends on what skill sets she has. I think, again, it would help to have a woman. Just imagine, I'm sure there are some films that show that. But just imagine a woman going in to negotiate with a hijacker, and he underestimates her. Oh, a woman, because any hijacker, I imagine, will be this, arrogant, yet afraid. There is some element of fear of failure in whatever he's doing. After all, he's doing something which can kill him. So he's going into this with a daring do, but at the same time, there is that element of wanting some kind of either he wants something out of you. So I think a woman would be wonderful because she would, all the qualities that I mentioned, she would need that. She can be firm.
Yeah, I think
and she can also be, appeal to his softer instincts if he has any.
If he has any.
Yeah. But at the same time, she can be very firm and convey messages of consequences that will come.
I think the conversation that day was that when we talk about diplomacy
Yeah.
and negotiation
Yeah.
skills, we almost always assume that you want a longer term, strong, mutually beneficial relationship.
Right.
And so it was said in that context
Oh,
that when you don't
no.
want, you don't ever want to see this guy again, right? He's a hijacker or
No,
he's a smuggler
absolutely,
or a terrorist.
absolutely.
So what part of you do you need to give rise to
But
walk away from that?
I'm not saying that it's only long term. Women are very capable in tactical aspects of diplomacy as well. And they can invoke that at a pinch.
And you have, so I think we have.
So all of us have in our own ways at home. We negotiate those every day. We have little blackmailers amongst our grandchildren and children. I mean, I don't have to negotiate with my grandchildren, but I see how they blackmail my daughters.
So, I want to ask you, two personal questions. One is, we all go into our lives and professions with a certain set of beliefs or assumptions about ourselves, about our lives. What has changed significantly for you? Something that you felt as a 25-year-old and you see completely opposite today?
In my case, as I told you, I had not been in any other profession before. Most of my peers who joined the Foreign Service had already taught or were in private sector or some other profession. So I went in there very, like a clean slate, with a clean slate. And no preconceptions about being in a profession. But it was both an advantage and a disadvantage. Advantage that I could immerse myself completely into this profession as the be-all and end-all. Whereas for others, they could be cynical, they could be, अरे हमने देखा है, ये है, that kind of thing. But the disadvantage was also equally that I was innocent in many ways. When you join a profession that early, you're also not experienced the workplace, you have not experienced the politics. So in many ways, I had to learn the hard way. So it was not that I mentioned this. I never gave up my idealism, whether it is about, my ambition for India. I still believe, even then when India was nowhere in the global map economically, I still believe that it has great potential and I will somehow help bring out that potential through whatever little contribution I can make. So I think it's that thing that I can make a difference in whatever small way or big way, but I must try my best and not give up on this and not be cynical. I think that is something very difficult to keep sometimes. Whether it's in the UN, whether it's in the Indian Foreign Service, you have to believe in your country, you have to believe in the mission of the UN, if you're in the UN. So I think that is something that was unchanging. But of course, one has to deal with realities. One has to be thwarted several times. And then, sometimes say, what is the point of all this? What am I doing, kind of thing. But I'll give you a story. We were in a Human Rights Commission. I was a delegate to the Human Rights Commission. And K.C. Pant was visiting. And he was a politician, very thoughtful man. I learned a lot from him. And I was this young, very enthusiastic multilateralist. And we were sitting in the Human Rights Commission and we were getting these resolutions passed. And he was sitting there and looking around, and he turns to me and he says, this all looks so surreal to me. So I very humbly heard him out, and I said, yes, maybe to you it does. For me, I've now immersed myself into it, and it really doesn't appear to me so surreal. I think we are doing something meaningful. Anyway, later that evening, we went for a dinner to the Colombian ambassador's place, and he was a former politician. So I turned around and told him what Mr. K.C. Pant had said about the Human Rights Commission and what we were doing there and this whole multilateral circus. So he turned around and said, I come from the world of politics. And I think that is surreal.
Ah, nice.
So
very nice.
Yeah.
Tell me, people always ask, what's the best piece of advice you've received? I don't want to ask you that.
I've already given too much advice.
No, what you
Unasked.
received. What you received. I want to ask you, what is a piece of advice that has always been given to you that has just not worked for you?
Not worked?
Yeah, not worked. Like bilkul rubbish.
Well, I'm now thinking, what has not worked is more difficult. I think some people have tried to put me in my place, to say ki bhai, tum ladki ho, ya tum woman ho, don't, and also don't take risks, I think that is something that risk-taking. Do women have the guts to take risks? Whether in terms of the issues they pick up, the way they negotiate. I think that advice, I listen to it, and perhaps it is somewhere in the back of my mind. And maybe I trim my ambitions sometimes on risk-taking because of that advice. But generally speaking, I do not take the advice of, don't take risks because you are a woman professional in this. And that's what I think that's
very nice. Okay, I'm going to ask you some rapid fire because we have to condense this into a short while. Ambition or contentment?
Both. Because I think, no, I'll tell you why.
I think I know what you're going to say. But yeah,
you know what I mean. That one must have ambition, but at every stage, be also in a state of contentment and happiness, and look back and say, I'm happy that I've come here. And it has happened to me, over the years that I was with you. Of course, you always aspire to be on the next stage. You want to be ASG, you want to be USG, you want to be Secretary General. But you have to also look back with satisfaction and contentment at where you have reached.
I have to confess, I'd forgotten that I was speaking with a diplomat because I don't think I'm going to get an or answer here. So, but I'm going to go through with it. Okay. Confrontation or compromise? Both?
I know, very difficult. These are difficult choices. It has to be a blend of both. Because you have to threaten to, I think, I didn't give you one example of how during negotiations my ambassador had negotiated away the mandate of UN Conference on Trade and Development, and I was the G77 spokesperson, and I kept telling him this is not Delhi's instructions to you, and it is not for you to give it away. He didn't listen to me. He negotiated to the American counterpart, and he left. This was in Cartagena, Colombia, so he left for the beach. Those days, no mobile phones. So I then and he said, now Lakshmi will negotiate the rest. So I came on and I clawed back everything.
Well done.
So, that's how one has to make that confrontation. And she said, but your ambassador agreed. I said, I don't care. I'm speaking for G77, not for him, not for India. So, and I clawed back everything.
See, I'm going to try again.
So, confrontation when necessary. Compromise when necessary.
Expressing or holding?
Expressing.
Okay, good. Bluntness or diplomacy?
Diplomacy sometimes requires bluntness.
Maximize or optimize?
Try to maximize and you may end up optimizing.
Okay, now I'm done with the difficult ones. I'm going to do the fun ones. Favorite cuisine?
Favorite cuisine? Well, my father was a Saraswat Brahmin from Karwar, and my mother was a fabulous. She was a Maratha, but she cooked that cuisine. So that is my favorite cuisine. That's something I always, remember my mother by, and there was something in her fingers that I evoke through recreating those recipes. So I love that fruit, of that food.
Eternal crush.
Well,
go for it.
Yeah. Well, I have a very straightforward answer. My husband, Mrs Puri.
Allowed नहीं है, लेकिन I let it pass.
Huh?
Allowed नहीं है, लेकिन I let it pass. नहीं, बिल्कुल भी allowed नहीं है.
No, but you see, my daughters always make fun of me when I try to give them dating advice. They turn around and say, how can you give?
Exactly.
No, how can you give? Because you've grown up a nun, went to Mater Dei, you went to, and you went to LSR, and then you married the first man you fell in love with. So फिर अब क्या? I don't have any other crush.
God bless. Favorite music?
And he is no parai.
Oh, sweet. Okay. Beach or mountains?
Mountains, definitely.
London or New York?
New York.
Okay. Okay, last question. Tell us something about yourself that is not commonly known.
I think I'm too much on social media, so I can't think of anything. And by the way, please do follow me on social media. Those of you who are on social media to find out what you don't know, which is not known. So Instagram,
something
I'm
like
Lakshmi, I'm woman. And also Twitter or X, I'm Lakshmi UN Women. Okay?
You're not going to tell us?
I don't know what it is that
I don't know, like you...
Ask me.
No. If I knew something that is not commonly known.
Thing that is not common.
I don't know, like I can tell you that I feel like I'll die of a bad smell. I walk into a lift sometimes and say, okay, fine, like this is what it's going to say. She died of a bad smell. Or scared of chipkalis or some such thing. Which you haven't put on Twitter yet.
Very difficult to think that. I know you are asking an impossible question. What is that secret?
You can't function without coffee in the morning. Some such.
Acha. No, coffee I don't drink.
You don't.
Maybe
that
is it. I'm trying to drink coffee because I've heard that it's good for the brain, prevents Alzheimer's as a senior citizen.
This is your secret, that you're doing all of this anti-Alzheimer's stuff without coffee in your system.
Yeah.
I really wish we had more time, but we have to close. I know that you have to be somewhere, I have to be somewhere, and the class has to be somewhere. But this has been an absolute delight, but it cannot be the last conversation because I had 3 pages of questions. So on your book, we are going to do a separate conversation. I was telling Radhana that we cannot combine the two, your life as a diplomat. But we will have you back. And thank you so very much for being with us. And
do read the book.
No, of course, we've got copies and we've got copies for our entire governing council.
Oh,
which we're
thank
giving
you
them
so
at the,
much. Some of them I discovered are very good friends.
Friends, yeah, but
and collaborators in the gender space as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
Meenakshi Gopinath,
Yeah.
for example.
Oh, my
yes.
principal. So,
Yes.
yeah. So we'll give them.
Okay. Thank you.
So much.